And we are
Good morning,
rolling.
everyone. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining again today. Here we are moving rapidly towards the middle of our program. So it's exciting to think about. Next week is our tour across Illinois to visit your communities. And if you just want to keep me updated on locations and times and your plans and what you'd like out of me, I'll be ready to do that. Last week we talked fiber optics with Calix. This week is wireless, and we have Ron Massac with Rise Broadband, large, significant fixed wireless provider um, in Illinois and beyond. And he's going to tell us how they do business and kind of the basics of fixed wireless technologies, getting into some of the cellular data services that are out there now as well, maybe a little bit of satellite. So, Ron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Bill said, my name's Ron Massac. I work with Rise Broadband, and I have a little presentation for you this morning about just the basics of fixed wireless network deployments. A little bit about myself and the company. I myself have been in the industry for 17 years. Years ago, I started out with a little company that my Boone County friends may remember as T6 Broadband. I actually live in Boone County. And we were eventually acquired by Rise Broadband. But I started off, I'm the typical work up from the bottom story. I started off fixing computers, answering phones for customers, doing wireless installations for customers, and eventually got into deploying the networks, maintaining the networks, and now I am into business development for Rise Broadband. But Rise was established in 2006. We operate in 16 states. Rise provides both fixed wireless and fiber to the home internet services in these states. And here in Illinois, we have for years served thousands of businesses and residential customers in our state, from all the way to the Wisconsin state line, all the way down to the Springfield area. But we have 25 employees in Illinois, about 400 tower sites, and we have deployed multiple fiber optic broadband systems throughout the state. But basically how fixed wireless works is the key word is it's fixed. It doesn't move. There is a receiver antenna placed on the roof of a home or a business, and it is pointed to a nearby tower that'll be broadcasting the internet signal. It's a secure connection. It's dedicated to the tower. It can provide high speeds, and with today's equipment, some of the equipment is capable of up to a gigabit per second with low latency. But the key with fixed wireless service is, for the most part, it needs to be line of sight, meaning that other buildings, thick foliage like trees can interrupt the signal. So it does require some planning to make sure that a tower location that is chosen has good line of sight service. But different tower types and equipment for fixed wireless. Pretty much for tower types, we can use commercial towers like cell phone towers you see when you're driving down the road. We can use rooftops of tall buildings. And we can even use grain elevators, water towers, harvester silos. And what we're looking for here is, when we're choosing a tower site, it is something that, again, has good visibility in the surrounding area and is above the tree lines, especially in the Midwest. One of the biggest challenges we have is thick tree lines can interrupt the signal. But what would be on a home or a business is called an access point. It's also referred to as an AP. But or not on a home or a business, forgive me. What we'd put on the tower would be access points. So these are radios that transmit to customer locations. They also carry signals between other towers. But the access points are directional. There'll be 3 to 4 on a given tower. They will broadcast out anywhere from a 65 to a 90-degree angle. So you want to have multiple radios on a tower to make sure you can get a good 360-degree broadcast. But each access point can typically handle between 50 and 150 customers simultaneously. Nice thing about the scalability of fixed wireless is that if you do get into a situation where there's enough customers on an access point to start congesting the speeds a bit, in many cases, you can add another sector and load balance the customers between that to relieve the congestion. But what would feed the towers would be called a backhaul. And a backhaul is typically going to be a dish and not a wedge or a sector, as we say. So it would be a point-to-point radio that specifically transmits between the towers to carry the customer bandwidth to a fiber circuit to go out to the internet. It can use both licensed and unlicensed frequencies. And many of today's backhauls are capable of up to 10 gigabits of throughput, which is quite significant. That's comparable to what a fiber optic cable could do as far as speeds. But at the base of the tower, you will typically see a cabinet, much like you do at cell phone towers. And inside that cabinet will be a router, switch, battery backups, power supplies, air conditioning. There could even be heating elements inside the tower to help regulate the temperature throughout the seasons. But we have some pictures here of what you might see on a fixed wireless tower. The picture on your left there shows a access point or a wedge or a sector sitting on the upper part of this pole here. And then down below that would be a backhaul, and that is a dish that is pointing to another tower to help carry bandwidth to or from. And then you'll see here on this water tower, we have different sectors of access points and backhauls to carry bandwidth throughout the network. And then the picture on the right shows you what the ground installation would look like. We have a battery cabinet, we have the equipment inside the cabinet, and then of course the cables that run up the tower to carry both power and bandwidth to the access points and backhauls. This is an example of customer premise equipment, what we call CPE. And these are examples of the equipment that would receive the signal from the access point on the tower. So generally speaking, it's going to be on the rooftop. There are situations where it could be placed in the yard on a pole if there's good line of sight to the tower, but 99% of the time, these will be placed on the roofs. But the cable will run from the CPE into the customer home, and it will plug into a router or a Wi-Fi router or another access point inside the house. And typically an installation can be done in an hour to an hour and a half. But one of the largest considerations when looking at fixed wireless is spectrum, the frequencies. So the primary spectrum bands that are used in fixed wireless for the customer equipment, most of the time is going to be unlicensed or what's called licensed by rule. And what licensed by rule means is it's CBRS, the Citizens Broadband Radio Service. And this is in the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum. And it's open for anyone to use, but if an operator wants to use this spectrum here, each device will need to be registered with an FCC database. And that includes the equipment on the tower. That would include a backhaul that transmits in that frequency band and the CPE. But the most common frequencies are 5 gigahertz range, 3.5 gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, and 900 megahertz. And I put these tables on here not so much to get into the weeds about frequencies and channels and channel width, but just to demonstrate to the audience here that it can be kind of complex to manage the frequencies there, because one of the pros of the unlicensed frequencies is they're available and they're free to use. But also the con of the unlicensed frequencies is they're available and they're free to use. So it really is important, as the network is being built and maintained, to be aware of what the RF environment is in a given area. Because if a nearby operator is using an overlapping channel or even the same channel, your customers aren't going to have the best experience they possibly could, because it's going to create interference. And interference will lead to buffering video on Netflix. It will lead to choppy phone calls. It can even lead to drop signals and packet loss. So that is probably one of the most important factors in considering deploying a fixed wireless, is managing the frequencies that you use. But there are varying in the spectrum. There's the different categories. There's, the unlicensed, which is the lowest cost to deploy. And as I mentioned, there's large availability. It's free to use. Anyone can use them. With a clean channel, you'll have fast speeds. You can add a lot of customers, but it is subject to line of sight. Then the license by rule, or the CBRS, is technically also free to use. But there's different categories. If I can just go back to this slide here, and I'll draw your attention to the priority access licenses. These would be granted through a bidding system, to where an operator in this area that wins this frequency channel has priority to use it, which means an operator would be limited to just this 50 megahertz right here if there's an operator in the area. So there is somewhat limited availability in certain areas with the CBRS spectrum, depending on the market that you're in. And as I mentioned before, every device must be registered in the national database. But we also have licensed frequencies, which is your best interference protection versus unlicensed frequencies. There is limited availability with these. The frequencies need to be coordinated with the FCC to make sure that the channel that you're asking for is available in that area. They're expensive to deploy the equipment for licensed transmission, and it can be kind of difficult to acquire a license in a given area. But a lot of licensed frequencies, they're primarily used by your cellular carriers for mobile, but they are available in limited quantity for your point-to-point connections, which, Rise Broadband uses quite a lot of licensed frequencies. But sometimes the availability of them, like for example, in Northern Illinois, in certain areas in Boone County, for example, 11 gigahertz, there's a lot of license that have been granted, and the frequency coordination on 11 gigahertz has become somewhat difficult. So an operator might use 18, 23, or even 80 gigahertz. Now, I will mention with these frequencies, for example, 80 gigahertz can be capable of up to 10 gigabits of throughput, but because it's such a high frequency, the distance is very limited. It could be a quarter to a half a mile in between a backhaul, which can make planning a network pretty difficult if you need structures that are tall. Versus at the lower end on 11 gigahertz, that can transmit 10 miles or more with a good signal and good throughput. But the capabilities of fixed wireless today, with your access points, your CPE performance, with today's gear, you can see anywhere between 100 to 400 megabits per second of throughput. Speed increases as your line of sight is improved. If your distance is optimal, And again, if this is going to be primarily unlicensed frequencies for your CPE, so having a clean frequency is of paramount importance. But today's equipment does have excellent interference mitigation, but it is not bulletproof, and it's important to recognize that. But the distance between an access point and customer premise equipment can be up to 8 miles with good throughput. You're going to see your best performance between 3 to 5 miles with good line of sight. You'll see high speeds, very low latency, which is good for video, phone calls, and gaming. Excuse me. But your backhaul, as I mentioned, can carry up to 10 gigabits of bandwidth between towers, and you can use either unlicensed or licensed spectrum links. I would recommend, as you know, in initially deploying a fixed wireless network, a lot of operators will start off with unlicensed, and as they grow, much as Rise Broadband did, will upgrade those backhaul links to a licensed spectrum for higher capacity and better throughput. But the graphic I've placed here is just to demonstrate, fixed wireless can be pretty versatile. It can be used in combination with fiber optic networks. For example, if we have a neighborhood that is filled with mature tree cover, that's going to make it difficult to get a wireless signal to a rooftop, you could feed a backhaul to a nearby tower and then run fiber optic to those homes to get around the line of sight problem. You'd only need line of sight to one location versus 10 or 20 or 30 locations in a small subdivision, and you just get the bandwidth to the home with fiber. You can also use fixed wireless while you're waiting for a fiber deployment to be able to get at least some measure of high-speed broadband to your customers while you're waiting for a fiber deployment. But generally, you'd want to use fiber for your dense areas and fixed wireless for your less dense and your hard-to-reach areas, mostly because of cost. Now here we've got just a little comparison between, we're all aware there's 5G home internet that's advertised from AT&T to Verizon to T-Mobile. In a lot of areas, this can be a viable solution. The pros of 5G are it's quick to deploy, it's easy to install, the pricing is affordable, and some providers will advertise up to 300 megabits per second. But they do vary by the provider. The research I've seen, AT&T they're able to provide anywhere between 40 to 140 megabits a second. Verizon advertises anywhere between 300 in some areas. In your larger cities, they can do even up to a gigabit per second. And T-Mobile advertises anywhere between 32 to 182 megabits per second, which I thought was very specific. But some of the cons are 5G has limited availability. This is generally deployed in some of your larger cities. The distance between the nodes isn't that great, so rural deployments can be challenging. Also, because you're using the same towers with 5G home internet, using the same towers as everyone's cell phone is in the area, speeds can vary. And I've read that in some areas, speeds can vary quite significantly, depending on what time of the day it is. But with 5G, the priority of traffic is given to mobile phones versus to the home devices that are sent to your house. Now, with fixed wireless, the pros are you're generally going to have local service. You're going to be helped by people that live in your communities, that work in your communities, that know many of your customers by name. Fixed wireless also offers extremely low latency in combination with speeds of up to 400 megabits per second. But the cons of fixed wireless are RF interference, particularly with unlicensed frequencies, which can affect performance, can affect speed, can affect packet loss. Another big con with fixed wireless is severe weather. I will say in my time as in managing towers, building towers, installing equipment, upgrading equipment, some of the largest outages that were the most difficult to repair over a wide area were because of severe weather, whether it was tornadoes, high winds, can blow a dish out of alignment, can even take a tower down to the ground. So that is, realistically something to consider. And also the line of sight limitations. This technology is pretty much designed for line of sight. But as far as partnering with an ISP, there's many benefits for both the community and for an operator. For the communities out there, the benefits of partnership. You have access to all the expert knowledge. As we like to say, we're the ISP. We've already made all the mistakes for you. So, and because of that, the risk can be shared between the partnership. There's, a lesser chance of spending a lot of money you didn't need to. But the benefit to the community with having a solid, robust infrastructure for high-speed internet is the economic opportunities. You'll have a lower cost of operation and trade for service. And what I mean by that is what a lot of wireless internet providers do, and we do it over and over in the state of Illinois, is we'll approach a community and ask if we can use their water tower. If we can put radios on top of your water tower, we enter into agreements to provide free internet service to anchor institutions such as libraries, city hall, the fire department, whatever works best for that community that we're in. And it's a very good cost-effective way for both the ISP and for the local community. The benefit to an ISP is the local community knowledge. No one knows your community better than you do, who lives in it. We can do all the research that we want, but some of your best knowledge comes from the people that live in the community. And because of that, it saves time to an ISP to be able to find suitable structures to place the equipment on. And of course, it lowers the cost of build and operations because the main reason an ISP wouldn't want to move into an area is because the return on investment wouldn't be there, or it would take a very long time to recoup the investment with some of this equipment that can be very, very, very expensive. One licensed backhaul link can cost upwards of $10,000. And, your average size ISP could have dozens of these links. So, but for the communities that are looking to partner with an ISP, you can go to the broadband map at fcc.gov and search for ISPs that are nearby, and find a local ISP that is operating in your area. And you can identify an ISP that's received funding to deploy network in areas nearby you and reach out to them. Schedule meetings. In business development, I reach out to the communities myself because we're looking for new markets to develop. But there's nothing stopping the community from reaching out and scheduling meetings for ISPs in their area to find out if a partnership would be worthwhile. And finally, I would like to thank you for your time. And
Ron, we've got kind of a general question about, if a county is kind of flat and, kind of typical central Illinois cornfield, and you're, just a few houses per mile or, 10 houses per mile or something. And what can you, in a nutshell, why would somebody advocate for fixed wireless as opposed to a full fiber network? What's your, and I know this is going on at the federal government discussions about financing and so on. Can you kind of summarize the industry's case there?
I believe, Bill, it all comes down to cost. At 10 to use your example, at 10 households per mile for example, it is very expensive to put fiber in the ground in rural areas, which has a lot to do with why federal funding is being offered to entice ISPs to do that. With fixed wireless, with a suitable structure nearby, you could, with the crew, an experienced crew, you could deploy access to the internet in one day and be able to schedule installations for those customers that are rural. And it's also far less expensive than deploying fiber.
Okay,
And less time.
thanks for that. Yeah. Can you talk about the impact of, what a hop is and how that numbers of hops impact fixed wireless performance? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
So how fixed wireless is fed generally is at some point there's going to be a head end, which is a fiber circuit. In Illinois, for example, Rise Broadband, we have several fiber circuits throughout the state. And our goal is not to have, and what Bill means by hop is he's meaning a wireless backhaul hop. So from tower to tower to tower to tower. Our best practices at Rise are trying to keep our hops to less than 4 hops off of a fiber circuit. Because, with weather, RF conditions, there is some risk to performance, the greater number of hops that you have to get to the customer endpoint.
Good. Thanks for that. Some counties have a strategy of wanting to build a middle mile network, connecting towns where there's a real shortage of fiber, based on their analysis that little towns out in the countryside don't really have any good service. And probably the main reason is there's no connectivity between the towns.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys ever participated then? Do you see that middle mile network as an advantage? Would you be interested in being on that middle mile network to?
Yes, because the middle mile is critical, and in less densely populated areas, the cost of an ISP putting their own middle mile in between small towns can be prohibitively expensive, and those costs alone could be enough to make the ROI just not there to want to invest. If there's an existing open access middle mile network, that is very enticing to ISPs to want to move into an area.
Great. Do you get most of your connectivity like from companies like big companies like, middle mile companies like Level 3 or Bluebird, or do you get it from Frontier or Consolidated? How does that work?
Well, here in Illinois and further down in Texas, there's a healthy mix of middle mile that was used, but here in Illinois, last year we laid fiber in 6 towns down in the Bloomington-Champaign area, and we installed our own middle mile. So the middle mile is owned and operated by Rise Broadband.
Okay, thanks for that.
But yeah, we haven't yet come across an opportunity in this state to be able to use open access middle mile.
Okay. And how have you found permitting right-of-way access in Illinois? Is that a challenge, or is that not too bad?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all. It's a pretty straightforward process. Probably what takes the longest are IDOT permits.
I think that's common and from state to state. I know that's a challenge.
Yes.
Do you guys have any of these developments where it's wireless backhaul to fiber to the home deployments? What's kind of any kind of general operating considerations there? How many homes, or what's the density at the end of that? From the wireless tower to the neighborhood. Have you guys done much of that? I know people, I've seen that in the drawings. I don't know that I see it too much out in the field.
Yeah, we actually have one town, Argenta, Illinois, that is fed by a wireless licensed backhaul. We are able to offer those. I don't have how many households right off the top of my head there, but we are able to offer 500 megabits a second in that town. Now, the towns that are nearby are fed by middle mile, but that's a great question, Bill, because one of the reasons that we chose to feed Argenta wirelessly was the cost to lay the middle mile into Oriana was about 3 times more expensive than we anticipated. So we had to go a different route.
Okay.
And if there had been
The
open access
rocks
middle
or
mile in between, that would have been great.
okay. Interesting, because especially in southern Illinois, the land is a lot different. It's hillier, there's more woods. What's your recommendation for places like that?
Well, that would be very challenging. My son actually graduated from SIU, so I'm somewhat familiar with Southern Illinois. That would be very challenging for fixed wireless. You, yeah, because the best frequency that we know of to be able to get through trees is 900 megahertz. But one of the drawbacks of that is it doesn't carry a lot of speed, but it will penetrate some foliage. But in a highly forested area, I think the best way to do it would be to have a backhaul feeding a structure and try to run fiber to the homes, even though it's fed wirelessly.
Okay, good.
Or another option would be for the customer to erect a tower on their property. So CPE could be placed above the tree line.
Okay. And I suppose in some of those places, if you could get a tower on top of that hill and then feed fiber down the roadside, to through the neighborhood, or
Mhm.
a lot of times those homes in those hillier spots are certainly more concentrated along existing roadways. That might be a
Right.
model.
Which would make it, and the greater the household density, the more cost effective it would be to place fiber there.
Okay. And just to let you know that these communities now are doing surveys of their community members with an emphasis on the rural portions. Already, I see Vermilion County has 670 surveys returned in just a couple weeks. So there's very strong interest in better broadband in that county. But in that, we're asking farmers if they are willing to host equipment on their vertical assets. Is that
Mhm.
information valuable to you? How could a community share that in an attempt to find a good partnership?
Well, they could call me. Um, but if you want to find ISPs that are near you, because Rise does operate in Illinois, we don't operate in the entire state of Illinois. But Vermilion County, I do think we have infrastructure. That's Danville, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just to the east of that, we do have some wireless infrastructure. But if private parties have been identified that would be open to hosting wireless equipment, reach out, whether it's to Rise Broadband or to a WISP near you, because it is sometimes challenging. Back in the early days, um, when I first got into this business, we would literally drive around, look for a grain elevator, and go knock on the door, which can be kind of intimidating. Uh, you know, like, here, I'm just some internet guy. Hey, can I use your grain elevator? But if there's already interested parties, to go back to the partnership slide, that really would save a lot of time for the ISP. So I would definitely say, if that's the case, reach out, let us
Okay.
know.
So I assume that a lot of your big radios are, kind of where you connect to the internet. Are you mostly then on cell towers for those connections?
Real healthy mix. So we will use a cell phone tower as what we call transit towers. There may be some access points on them, but generally it will carry the bandwidth. There will be anywhere from 2, 3, 4 backhauls on these towers that generally would be a 3, 4, maybe even a 6-foot dish, depending on how far the shot is to the next tower. Because and the reason that we don't focus on commercial towers is because they're very expensive in their monthly rent to host on. So as far as getting access points to reach customers, we're big fans of using grain elevators and municipal water towers.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks for that clarification. There's one more question about the rights of ways and easements. You know, when you build fiber, um, uh, we've got a lot of the Farm Bureau is a big supporter of this program, but they also have that interest in protecting property owners' rights. And so in Illinois, we know is a little different, that a lot of times the farmer owns to the center of the road. Is that, do providers need help with that with the community, or is that something you just prefer to do on your own? What's the value there of some community support?
In cases like that, which I personally haven't run across, that it would that would be critical, because we would have to be, not whether it's Rise or another fiber provider, you would have to be allowed to record an easement if it's not a public right of way. Because, like, for example, many of your ISPs like Rise, we're a registered CLEC in the state of Illinois. So, and it's a competitive line exchange carrier. And basically, in order to foster competition, way back when Ma Bell got broke up, CLECs have access to public rights of way statewide. But if there isn't a public right of way, we need an easement.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Any other questions from the audience? I think this presentation, Ron, has been great. I think right at the perfect level of detail and technology and so on. If you, like, off of a radio, how many customers can you serve off one tower?
Well, with use an unlicensed, see, I have 4 sectors, anywhere between, you can fit 50 to 150 on the newest access points that are available out there. So you could have upwards of 500-600 folks on one tower.
Okay, well, it's a lot, yeah.
It can be. We don't have any that heavily populated in Illinois, but I know in other areas that Rise operates, we do. And it's just really amazing that the technology can handle that many.
Can you just share a little bit about your prices and bandwidth packages? What's your standard offering and what does that cost?
Well, standard, do you want me to fiber or wireless or both?
Well, let's start with wireless.
Okay. So wireless is going to be less than $100 a month. I haven't looked into it recently, but our we'll have a 50 or 100 megabit package for $59.95.
Okay.
For fiber in our fiber communities, we can be very flexible there. I know in a couple of them, we'll have a starter package of, toning down the speed 25 megabits a second for $25. It's not much, but it's enough for your basic user. Or we could go all the way up to a gigabit per second for about $90 a month. So less than $100 a month. And one of the points I like to make is that we're always going to be less expensive than your typical cable operator.
Can you, if there's a community here, obviously most communities have some service already through an existing cable company, generally, or most towns. What makes Rise to think about going in and overbuilding with fiber to the home in a town like that?
Versus having, say, a town that had just cable?
Yeah.
A couple reasons. Number one reason being is fiber is synchronous. So for example, if you had a 100 megabit per second package, you're going to get 100 megabits down. You're also going to get 100 megabits up. Cable is very, very download heavy. So you could get 100 down, but you might only get 15 to 25 out. And we live in a day and age where more and more people are working from home. So the upload becomes more important. more and more young folks are being educated at home, which also makes the upload important. Also, cable infrastructure in many areas is aging, and every year that goes by, if you study the market, more and more people are cutting the cord. Cable is an industry that in most areas is on the decline, so we have no problem going in and overbuilding a cable provider.
Okay. And what makes a town attractive to you?
For fiber, particularly, it would be only cable is available to those folks. DSL is not even really a consideration anymore because DSL just is not able to offer the speeds that people are accustomed to today. So, but if I'm, in my role as business development, if I'm looking at a community that I know they have a cable provider, and if I talk to City Hall and they let me know that there's another company that is pulling permits to lay fiber, I'll just keep on moving down the road because we don't want to be the third fiber provider or the third high-speed provider in a town, just because odds are you're not going to get the market share you're looking for that
I
ROI.
understand. Yep, good. Okay. Well, good. Ron, this has been really great. I think I really sometimes the wireless can get pretty technical, right? And people dive into those the spectrum charts.
I didn't want to get in the weeds.
Makes my head spin. So I think for our community folks out here on the call, this has been a really excellent presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
And thanks for your information. You might be getting some contacts from our 6 counties here that are interested
Sounds
in
great. Sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
Good, thank you. So good. And let's Ron, do you want to stop sharing? That'd be great. There we go. Thank you.
There we go. Okay.
Perfect. And you're free to go if you want. Are you happy to stay on? Our teams are gonna break into their own work groups here coming up. So in a few minutes for their own work that they do.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much, everyone. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. Have a great day.
Thanks again.
Bye.
So it is now we're into the going to our workrooms. I think people probably have seen in the chat, Nancy has Massac at 58, Lee at 127, Vermilion 671. Holy cow. Johnson 37, Boone 11, and Lawrence 109. So pretty big mix. I know that there's some folks have really launched with gusto, others are more of a soft launch. So still plenty of time to get those surveys done. I think we're about a month out from the deadline, I think, which is May 15th or so. So don't hesitate, try and get as many surveys as you can. And especially just kind of before we get into that end of year school rush and all those kind of things that people are preoccupied or beginning to think summer. So now is a great time to promote and get those surveys out in your community. Maybe I'll take a chance and ask Vermilion, what's been your strategy to get 670 surveys done already?
Well, I think, what our thought was just use all of our networks. Everybody that's on kind of our main committee has pumped it out. Like, for instance, Vermilion Advantage, the organization I represent, we've got a lot of membership, a lot of businesses. We ask them to distribute it to their employees, and we've gotten a good response. I think Farm Bureau was very aggressive at getting it out in their the Farm Week newsletter that goes out every week, and so everybody on our committee has just really pushed it out into their individual networks, and we've got a good response. I was hoping for a good response, but I never believed that it would be like this. So it's yeah,
Well,
It's
that's a
worked.
great idea to ask employers to send it out to their employees, that's a lot of people. They may end up with some folks who are doing surveys from other counties, but don't worry about that. We can sort that out and make sure that, but it could be valuable to those other counties. So you might be doing a good deed for your neighbors. So thank you so much for that update. And any other questions or concerns about how the program is going? I'd like you to, I know the survey is a big task. And now trying to line up these meetings with broadband providers is a critical task. And so if you need any contact information, I know that we've shared some of that with folks, you know, the provider list that they say that provide service in your county is from the FCC, and so that's a list to start from. And then again, to look outside your community, you know, 30, 40, 50 miles to see, you know, look at using the broadband maps at the state broadband map link. You can see where the fiber is, which kind of providers offer that, and make reach out to them if you can. If your response from your existing providers is less than what you're hoping for. And you know, stirring the pot a little bit, the thought of competition itself can spur broadband providers to action. I saw yesterday a letter from Frontier to a community that says, hey, we're really interested in working with your community. So that looks like a good opportunity to reach out to them and see what they have to say. And again, the bigger the funnel you can create of prospective broadband provider partners, the more options you might have, even if you think, well, you know, they're not likely to come over to our community, but maybe they would, if especially when you have a bunch of people who, through a survey, say they want better internet service. So that's all part of this process. Really intensive information gathering right now. So the more that you have that kind of in hand, the more mature that is with survey results and provider interviews, looking strongly at your maps, that can really help you out. Sometimes I think we underutilize the maps. And if you're really, I think Reed is an expert at the maps. And so if you're looking for help with understanding the maps, either Reed or Shavika, who's been, I'm not sure if she's on the call today, but is our kind of our resident map expert and really can dive in and help. Don't be afraid to take some time. And even if it's one or two people like to fiddle with that kind of mapping software, they can really uncover some great information as we go. So there's one thing that from our cohort that's just finishing up, they're going to do their presentations tomorrow, is an emerging issue around a program called RDOF, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, that the FCC provided, had a reverse auction, and they provided significant subsidies to companies. Well, a lot of those companies, and they say it's almost a third of them, have failed to follow through on their commitments. And in Illinois, there's two companies in particular, LTD and another company called AMG, that as wireless providers said that they could deliver gig service. So they got kind of their bonus points, and they bid extremely low because they said they're ultimately we're going to use wireless for a lot of this, some combination of wireless and fiber. Right now, their maps it's really just kind of recently come out. They're come to our attention at a minimum that a lot of areas in rural Illinois are covered by those two companies. And so whether they're going to be eligible for BEAD funding or how the FCC is going to deal with these companies in that are essentially now in legal default on these obligations, what's going to happen there. So Reed and I are dedicated to learning as much as we can about this. And so we're going to be able to speak more intelligently about it next week. But that's kind of our plan to get that so we can really convey what this is all about. And there's a growing kind of coalition of rural places in Illinois that are extremely interested in this issue. So stay tuned for that. And maybe, Reed, we could create those RDOF maps for our new cohort, and maybe you've already done that. So
Working on it.
yeah, I know that's in process. So some places are really affected and other places are much less affected. And so it's we don't want you to be caught unaware, and then what the policy issues that come out of that are important. I see Nancy's talking about if you need help with maps, in particular, Illinois Broadband Lab folks, and that includes Robbie and some of the folks that are your community liaisons in your rooms can really help with that as well. Any other questions or comments before we go to the breakout rooms? Hillary, do you want to take a moment and talk about the summit?
Sure, absolutely. So, we're here with the Illinois Office of Broadband, and we are having our first Broadband Deployment and Digital Equity Summit and in Chicago from May 8th to the 10th. It's going to be a really, really great networking opportunity, but also we will have two tracks. We will have kind of a broadband deployment track and also that digital equity track. So whatever you are working on or looking for, we will have some activities for it. We've got some really great community activities as well. We're very excited about that. So that link there that I dropped has all the information, including hotel information and a close look at the agenda. So you can take a look at that. I had spoken to a couple of folks, especially over in Crawford County. They were saying, Chicago's a long way for us. And I totally understand that. So moving forward, you may have seen that we are working on our Digital Equity Act application through the federal government. So basically, we will be a sub-grantor for this program. We're going to apply for the money from the federal government, and then we are going to then grant it out to folks working on digital equity programs. That coming up, we also heard that grant readiness and grant preparation is a big capacity issue for folks, especially in smaller communities with smaller capacity. So one thing we will be doing as we get closer to this application process, which will be, late summer, we're looking at potentially early fall, we will be coming to your area to do some grant prep workshops. So both in person and digitally. So there will be opportunities for anyone who wants to get in on that and wants the lowdown on the grant application process, this particular one, but also just generally how you work with grants with the state. So as you get going with that, if you have any questions, please let us know. We'll have some prep checklists as we get closer. And are we streaming any of the summit? Some of the programs will be recorded, is what we're hearing right now. So they won't be live streamed necessarily, but they will be available after the fact. So
good. Great to hear that. Thanks, Hillary. I don't know, the streaming is always a escalation of logistics, and the recording is quite a bit simpler and easier. So thank you for that. And Robbie is talking about his ready meetings. Robbie, you want to come on? And
sure, thank you. So there's going to be a lot of stuff happening after the summit. The summit, in a way, is like a look back, but also a look forward now that the state digital equity plan has been approved, and there's a lot of Digital Equity Act funding and other things going on. So READY is going to be one of the key programs, I think, to help regions navigate a lot of different funding that'll be available and kind of connect with other people working on digital equity issues. So I just want to invite everybody on here. You've probably heard me talk about the READY program. If you're curious about it or what's kind of going on in your region, we're doing final presentations this Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. So all the different regions are going to kind of share what it is they've been doing. So it's going to be a great opportunity, I think, to just connect with some key people working on issues like digital navigation and digital literacy, particularly through the university lens. So my email is in there. I think the best way is just send me an email. I can add you to the meeting taking place this Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. Thanks.
Thanks, Robbie. And I would just advocate, I think regional planning is great in broadband, but I think what you're doing at the county level is a lot more empowering in terms of local action. But I think what you do find is that when you go through our program, Broadband Breakthrough, you're much better prepared to really actively participate at a regional level where that makes sense to build a coalition that, like in the Southeast area, they're really hip now to this RDOF issue. And so what's their plan as a group of counties? When 5 counties call their Congress members and say, we need help on this, you should do something, that carries a lot more weight than one person from one county calling them. So that's where I think these things really fit together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Bill. There's often kind of the next step of really kind of targeting certain areas in your county around access or affordability issues, even after the really difficult work of what you're doing in this, which is more of the infrastructure side of things. So we'd love to kind of engage in that issue. And like Bill said, there's power in numbers, getting people together. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Well, Nancy, let's open up the breakout room, stop recording, and